So I'll just start by introducing myself. I'm Mary Abeyasekera. My background is that my degree was in engineering. I'm a secondary trained teacher. I've done robotics and animatronics. That's kind of where I started. My degree's from Brunel University. And then somewhere along the line, I thought it was a good idea to teach. Once I started teaching, I realised the kids I was best with were the kids no one else wanted in the room. So the kids that annoy people are the kids I get on really well with. So I kind of ended up just sliding across into special schools, and then I picked up a school called the Harbour School, which is in Cambridgeshire. It was a residential school for, back in the day, emotional and behavioural difficulties children, now social, emotional and mental health children. And I only became head because everyone else got sacked or removed from the site. So I was left to be head, and we took it from inadequate to outstanding in 4 years. Did a couple of other things, ended up working for Ofsted, became Ofsted's national lead for special needs, wrote the local area inspection framework, which is not what inspects schools, but what inspects local authorities' health and social care for the provision in SEND, and then decided I wanted to work with kids because that's what I'm good at. So I left Ofsted to go back to schools. So I'm now the executive director of Meridian Trust. We've got, well, on any day it might change, 31 or 32 schools, depending on when they sign the forms. And those schools are mainstream secondary with sixth form, mainstream primary, and a range of special schools. So we're an all-inclusive trust, and we're really clear that we're an all-inclusive trust, and that for us it's about placing high-quality education in the community where children are, not that they have to travel miles for it. So we talk about that high-quality educational provision and that every child needs to be successful. Our biggest school is, or will be, the Northstowe Learning Campus. Northstowe Learning Campus is in a brand new town in Cambridge. It's currently already got the secondary school, and it has Martin Bacon, which is the special school. It's having a primary school built the other side of the special school, and a post-16 built. Now the post-16 will be for all children, whether you come from the special school or the mainstream school, you will learn alongside each other. So it will be a learning campus that's probably going to push 2,000 or 3,000 kids by the time you get to the end of it. But it's got a one-gate philosophy, that being that all children are welcome, any age, stage or ability or disability. They're welcome to come through the gate, and they will go off to their area of learning, be that in a mainstream school or a special school. Children move between the special school and the mainstream school anyway. So I've got a couple of autistic children who are absolutely brilliant at maths, and one that's very good at science. So rather than learn in the special school a curriculum which is tailored for children with more complex needs, they go to the secondary school to do maths or science. I've got one that goes to the choir next door because she's brilliant at music. So just because you come to a special school doesn't mean you have to stay. We have a shared vision, and I think that's the way. Historically, obviously, schools had like a list of rules, and the staff couldn't remember the rules, let alone the kids. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, trying to hold a kid to a rule that the member of staff couldn't remember the wording of was pointless. So obviously at Northstowe it's quite interesting because we've got children this big, and we'll have 18 in the special school, 19-year-olds. Then we've got children with complex learning needs. So we were trying to encompass some. So as is be kind, be curious, be hardworking. One of my other special schools is be safe, be respectful and learn stuff. Now on the flip side of that, teachers have to have those too. So at Harbour it's, you know, keep me safe, teach me, remind me to be respectful and plan stuff worth learning. And that's the teachers sign up to the same kind of set of core pillars, we call them. So they're our 3 pillars, but they're across all our schools at Northstowe, relevant of your age, stage or ability. We work on a curriculum for the future of an individual. It's all centred around the children. Some of our really complex needs learners may not have a voice, but can engage with us, and you know, if we stop and think and listen carefully, you can always work out where a young person's at. The biggest difference is the curriculum, because what we have is, we call this our My Journey curriculum. Everything that you would expect to be in a school is in the My Learning purple box. Everything else is our SEN bit of excellence. So the My Community piece about young people with complex needs having the right to access a community. So can they get on a bus? Well, they can only get on a bus if the bus is accessible. Can they? So all of that work has been done as part of this school. So the bus stops at Northstowe have accessible buses, and all of that piece of work has been supported by the school too. So it is that breadth. We talk about progress from where children are. That's really important for all SEN youngsters. The curriculum is a bit like a roadway. If you think about it like a motorway, but it's got 4 lanes. Now, special schools are very often this way, but actually more mainstream schools now are having enhanced resource provisions or additional support groups, or I know that Redbourne has a resource provision for autistic young people. Thomas Deacon has something, but I can't remember what it is, and I think it's in their Peterborough school, and I have no clue about Dunstable, sorry. So our pathways are discover our most complex learners, all the way to our pioneer learners who really ought to be in a mainstream school. Once you get to pioneer, you ought to be going away, because you can probably access a mainstream school. We think about it like a place of houses, where you can all access all of the houses, but what you get when you get to the front door is slightly different depending on how able you are. So we also have the My Pledge aspect. This is a trust-wide thing. So we have 99 things to do before you're 15 3/4. So if you come from a really challenged background and you've never been to the seaside, some of the things on that list are things like eat fish and chips on a seawall, play an arcade game, build a sandcastle. So it's our responsibility to make sure you as children have the opportunity to do all 99 things. And you get awards as you work through the 99 things.
So the school will organise trips to do that?
Yep. Yeah, and we will take youngsters deliberately to do, clearly we'll add a subject learning to the trip as well. So we might be doing, I don't know, if it's a mainstream school, rock formation or something, and we might go and do that at the cliffs somewhere, but we'll also take the kids for 30 minutes, play on a beach, eat fish and chips, you know, be chased by seagulls, all of the stuff that I think lots of people take for granted, that some of our youngsters, particularly young people who are in that crossover between having SEN and being identified as pupil premium. So, you know, those challenged young people who are very vulnerable may not have had the chance. One of the things is open a bank account. Still shocks me how many children leave school and don't have a bank account. You know, even with £1 in it. If they haven't got it, then we'll take them to a bank. We'll open them an account with £1. You know, it's really important to us because that's a life chance. If you want to think about preparing children for adulthood, actually, those are life chances. Then we have our pledges. They go all the way from doing something kind to someone in school, which is a copper, through to gold, which might be going on stage somewhere, but not a school stage, like going and performing somewhere big, somewhere special. And we encourage children through the pledges. And those pledges are quite important to our youngsters. You get pins or badges dependent on your age, and if you're really challenged behaviourally, we're not giving you a pin. We'll give you an iron-on patch, or because actually those pins can become difficult in some of our CMAT schools. So all of our pledges exist. And then someone said the way. Yes, we have the MBA way. But actually for us, the MBA way is how adults behave, not for children. So it's about how adults meet children, how they make sure that the classroom's ready for children to learn, how they plan that learning journey for the day, what vocabulary they're going to teach. So rather than the MBA way be rules for young people, our MBA way is rules for our adults. And then we have our flight paths, which is how we measure progress. because at Northstowe we will have children from really complex needs who won't be able to access much curriculum and are, you know, might be wheelchair bound, might be profound. We go all the way through. It's really important that what we do is start where children are at. So our scales of progress go all the way from that to GCSE. So every step of progress in maths is mapped in a flight path all the way from here to GCSE. So they're like this. They're like chunky handbooks, but it means that every child can make progress from where they are, irrelevant of their starting point. It also means that adults know what children need to have learned already to be able to move forward. Sometimes people forget that if you didn't learn this, then you're not ready to learn that. Okay, so you've just been downstairs learning about the legal and the history of SEN. So what is the definition of SEN, special educational needs and disabilities? What is legally its definition in the Code of Practice? Do you know? So SEND is children have special educational needs, or if they have a learning difficulty which means they need provision to be made for them. So that means that they have a greater difficulty in learning than most children their age, or they have a disability which means they can't access provision alongside children of the same age in mainstream or post-16. It's a very low bar because the whole point of identification is may. So when we apply for education, health and care patterns, the bar is a child may have a special need. So really low bar. So it's quite shocking actually how many children get turned down and then have to reapply. But the definition is therefore a bit woolly. It makes it difficult to measure and it makes it difficult to understand. One of the keys to that is the lack of terminology and the lack of shared terminology. And we have to remember that in SEN, there are acronyms coming out at a rate of knots. Okay, we're going to challenge you with some of those acronyms in a minute. But actually, the key is shared expectations and, you know, that expectation that you will be effective in encouraging or assuring us that children make progress. Now, in lots of secondary schools, I don't know about primary so much, but they use a term AP. Do you know the term? Alternative provision. Okay, so one of my shared terminology things in our trust is I've banned the use of that word, alternative. Because all alternative did is it meant we put children somewhere else where we couldn't see them, out of sight, out of mind. Well, that didn't help. And no one was checking. So what we've been working on, come in, is making sure that what we do is change the word to appropriate. So when we challenge people about provision, we now challenge people about appropriate provision. If it's not the most appropriate provision for a young person, why are they going? Because the key is that you've got to set up stuff for children with needs that is going to meet their needs and is going to be appropriate. So simple changes in shared terminology can make the world of difference if we do it well. Right, here are some of those acronyms. We'll see how many you know. So some of them don't tend to come as acronyms, although ASC does, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So do you know what any of the acronyms on the right-hand side stand for?
It's SLD, speech language disorder.
Oh, now if you go, which one did you say? SLD. If you go two more down to SPLD.
Speech and language disorder. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So difficulty, that one is. Okay, so yeah, so we've got SPLD. So try again at the SLD.
Speech language.
Delay.
So if I tell you the top one is severe learning difficulty, have a guess at the next one down. Nearly. Moderate learning difficulty. Yeah, great. So then you get to PMLD. Keep going on the severe, moderate,
Pretty massive.
Pretty massive. Do you know, I'll take that one. I like that. I'm going to use that in the future. I really like that one. Yes, profound and multiple. Pretty massive is not far away. So I like that a lot. Profound and multiple learning difficulty, and SEMH is.
Severe.
So that was the top one, was severe. Social, emotional, and mental health. Yeah. Okay. Autistic spectrum condition. I say condition. So I say ASC. Lots of people say ASD. So people talk about it being a disorder or a condition. I like the word condition. I don't like the word disorder. So I tend to go condition as far as I can. So, okay. So we've said first one is ASC. Next one is, so that's autism, social, emotional, mental health, MLD, VI is visual impairment, and the bottom one, anyone remember? Pretty massive. Just take pretty massive, okay? Because that will help you when I do this. So, which child do we think, let's go that one first, profound and multiple, pretty massive learning difficulty. Which young person would you say matches that? What does it look like? Okay, you're going for the middle one. Okay,
Top left, just to go different.
Okay, so then we're going to go visual impairment. Which child do you think is visually impaired?
Top right.
Okay, then I'll go moderate learning difficulty. Don't forget you've got social, emotional, and mental health and autism left. So you've got moderate.
So, I reckon I'll be top left.
Okay. So social, emotional, and mental health.
Bottom left.
Okay. Autism.
Yeah. Bottom right.
Okay. How do you know? What's that one then? Do you know who that is?
Yeah.
So, are you going to say he's got pretty massive learning difficulties, or are you just going to say actually it's not profound and multiple learning difficulties, it's actually his ability cognitively was massive, he had a physical disability. So if you can't judge him to be a label, why is it okay to judge any of them to be a label? And the answer is because I asked you to.
So I was going to say, you've got on the spot. I couldn't categorise.
Don't ever let anyone do that, okay? Don't ever let anyone put you on the spot, because actually the young lady in the middle is absolutely incredibly bright, okay? The one at top left was kid listening to a piano on Google, and that's because for some reason quite often people link music with autism, so they tend to say that one's autistic. Visually impaired is a statement of fact. The young man at the top right is visually impaired, okay? The rest of them are just labels that are not well defined and not well understood anywhere. So if you can't label him, don't label children. That's my piece of advice. Because if I pick a child up in Brighton and Brighton say they're a moderate learning difficulty child, and I drive north, their label will change, because there is no national guidance for those labels, okay, unless they're statement of fact labels. And the saying, if you've met one autistic person, you understand one autistic person, is true of every label. Autism is not a general term, okay? Lots of people have learning difficulties. Some of us don't always believe they're difficulties. It's about how you manage that. So the other problem with the labels is that it can limit expectations. So we say, oh, a kid's got MLD, oh, they'll never do a GCSE. No, rubbish. They might do a GCSE in art. They might do a GCSE in PE, but no, they might not get one in English. But they might get a different qualification in English. And all our autistic children made X amount of progress. So what? Where did they start from? Because every child will be different. And then we'll see that sort of stuff happening, and then schools will say, but we're inclusive. So I challenge back quite often, okay, are you? Is that inclusion? Or are children just corridor dwellers? And that's one of those terms that people don't really use. But you know those children who just sit in the corridor outside the head's office? Yeah, that was me. So it's that bit of, let's not just be inclusive and have the children in the building. Let's make sure we meet their needs. You were going to ask
rather
something?
than saying, labelling them as autistic, would you say a student has autistic tendencies?
I wouldn't even say that. I would be saying that young person needs support too, whatever it is. Interact socially with their peers, engage in noisy classroom situations, go into the dinner hall, because what that allows me to do is put in provision that meets the need. So if I describe the need and not the label, suddenly everybody else is far more able to meet the needs of the child because they know what the needs are. Whereas the label told me absolutely nothing.
It's so broad.
Because they're just meaningless. They don't help you. You know, people fight for a diagnosis, for example, autism, but the spectrum of autism is so massive that actually that doesn't mean you know where on that spectrum they are. Yeah. You know, you might have a CEO of a massive multi-million-pound company that has a diagnosis of autism, but I've also got some really complex needs young people in my school with no language who've got autism. It doesn't help you support them effectively. So we always talk about, tell me about the need. And when we come to behaviour in a minute, you'll see that that's exactly the same thing I do about that as well. You know, naughty boys, what's naughty? What's naughty?
I'm saying, would you ever say that some kids, there's just nothing wrong with them? They're just the way they are. You know, like, you could do everything, change their seating plan. Like, that's very generic for everything, but it's just the way they are. Would you ever accept that?
I would never accept that they have. What I would be saying is, what need haven't I identified? So, in the moment, as in, kid comes into school and does something really stupid. Okay, that's a moment of madness, isn't it? Everybody has those moments. Have we ever done anything really stupid? Well, I know I have. Yeah. There are moments in my life where I've literally gone, what on earth did I think I was doing that about? So we all have those moments, but if it's a continual pattern, then I'd be breaking it down even further. What haven't we identified? What don't we know? Why can't we take that step? Now, I said earlier, some of us don't see them as difficulties. One of the things we do at Martin Bacon is we identify everybody's superpower. And we work really hard at identifying everybody's superpower, and I mean everybody. So my canteen staff, my teachers, my office staff, everybody has a superpower. Down to my most complex needs child, there will be something that child can do better than they do other things. And it might be engage people. And we also all have to take ownership of our own challenges. So any colleagues that work with me in my schools will absolutely tell you I'm ADHD, okay? And I can be a nightmare. I can do that thing where I can be on a Teams call, I can be typing, I can be reading another document whilst typing a totally different document, and then someone will say, Mary, you're not even listening. And I'll tell you exactly what you said for the last 2 minutes. And my CEO's like, you drive me insane. So we now have an agreement that I have my fiddle toys. I have a ring on that I fiddle with. But also, if I reach the point where I know I'm going to fiddle and be a nightmare, I'll turn my camera off on a Teams call, because otherwise everybody's watching me be a nightmare. Now I'm distracting as well as being a nightmare. So, but actually, that is my superpower. The fact I can do all those things at the same time is wicked when you harness it. At school, it was a nightmare. Can you imagine trying to be my teacher? I was a nightmare. In a workshop, yeah. In a workshop, I was brilliant because my DT teacher just got me sus, and he was like, right, you're going to do that. And instead of saying, right, we're going to do this one task, he'd lay out the whole plan for whatever we were doing for the 3 weeks, and then just go, Mary, tell me when you've got to the end. And, you know, if that was week 1, he didn't mind. He'd just set me another challenge in week 2. Whereas other teachers that were like, can you sit down? Can you? No, that's a real challenge. And even now, if I go to big meetings, my CEO would identify his own learning needs and would talk about the fact that maybe he has some traits that mean he likes things ordered and he likes things organised. So reasonable adjustment wise, he and I can't sit together. He lines up the pencils, I flick them around the room, right? So in a classroom, you'd never allow that, would you? You wouldn't put us together. Yet we're at the top of a multi-academy trust and we embrace them as superpowers. So when you get those youngsters in your classrooms, as you move forward in your career, find their superpower because they'll love you for it. If you can be the person that can harness that kid's superpower, whatever it is, if they learn a very different way, it's okay. Embrace their superpower and let them run with it because it's so important. Redbourne have a similar thing to this, correct?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, strange that. I wonder why. I think it's almost exactly the same. Yeah. So we have a waved approach to identification of SEN and the support of SEN. And that's because if you build a ladder, everybody tries to get kids to the top where the education, health and care plan is. Actually, do you need to be at the top? So if I get a young person here who's struggling to read in the classroom, clearly having problems, so I do an intervention and what I realise is they can't see very well. So I now print all of their stuff onto bright yellow paper in black ink, and what I then do is I give them a yellow book with a black pen. Do they need to go on the SEN register because they've got an identified need? No, because actually a yellow paper and a black pen is a reasonable adjustment. So therefore they can move to wave one. So we talk about moving along because actually it doesn't matter which way you move, that's by your need. It's not a failure to move that way, but equally it's not a failure to move this way. It might be successful to move that way, or it might be really successful to move this way. So we make sure that we do this all the way along. And this first wave is what you should do every day in your classroom. It's just that high quality teaching and those reasonable adjustments. The key is knowing what's reasonable. Because the Code of Practice, which will be in the document the lady referred to downstairs, talks about best endeavours and reasonable adjustments. When you ask people what reasonable means, the answer is it's reasonable until it's not reasonable. Okay, brilliant. So child A, Harry, is in my classroom. Is my reasonable and your reasonable going to be the same? And is your knowledge and my knowledge the same? So that doesn't mean my knowledge is any better than your knowledge, but my bag of knowledge is different to your bag of knowledge. So what's reasonable to me as an adjustment and what's reasonable to you will be very different. But that's okay, because we can still all learn from that, can't we? Because you can share your reasonable adjustments with me and I can share mine with you, and we can work out if they are actually reasonable. Because once you get to a point where it's not sustainable, it's probably not reasonable. If it can't be done, it's not a reasonable adjustment anymore. But don't sit Harry next to the window. Don't sit Mary next to her CEO. They're all reasonable, aren't they? Give a child a thicker black pen and yellow paper. That's reasonable, isn't it? That's not a big deal. We can all do those things easily. We don't have to change a lot to give a child a black pen and yellow paper. So it's about trying your best and doing what you can. And I think Code of Practice got a bit stuck in terminology here, and actually people then go, oh, but what's reasonable? No, doing what you can. Can you do it? Can you do it in a classroom with what you've got? If you can, it's reasonable. But that doesn't mean one size fits all. We all know what this stuff is, yeah? Yeah. Now, if I asked you now to put together some instructions to build that block, how would you go about that? If this was going to be an activity in your classroom, how would you go about giving, and then they're not going to have, well, unless you give them it, they're not going to have the pictures. So how are you going to give the instruction?
I think 'cause I'm quite methodological, I'd probably have like each step. So 1, put the white block down. 2, put the orange block with. So I'd really set out how I would do it.
And how would you do that? Would it be like a list in writing?
Yeah.
Okay. What about you guys? You're mathematicians, so I'm interested.
Model it for them, so physically do it in front of them with the visualizer or something like that, so they can see it. Make a drawing on the board, different pieces or something. Put arrows to make it clear.
Okay.
Visual.
And how would you be deciding on how you're going to do it? What made you go visual and what made you go writing? Are you a visual learner?
A little bit, yeah, but I think, especially in maths, you model a lot of stuff because they can see the methods and stuff, so it's good to model it so that they can clearly see the steps to follow.
And you said you're quite methodical, so
you in front of me, yeah, like the actual writing. If I saw it, it would be great, but I think it would just go out my brain.
So you've done the process bit, which is all great, but that's your preferred way of teaching.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 1 is, which children have I got in front of me? Because if I give you a child who can't read, who might not be able to hear very well, might be deaf, your route's going to be really difficult, isn't it? But if I give you a blind child, your route's going to be really difficult. So before we decide how we're going to teach something, we have to look at the kids in the room. Because if you've got a me in the room who's going to fiddle with everything, I can tell you now, I will have built something out of that, and it won't necessarily be polite. But equally, somebody else will have just done it like that. So you've got to look at the youngsters in the room. You've also got to look at the resources. So I do actually go out and do this task with ECTs out in the wider world who come for training at some of the special schools. And what I give them is nano Lego, which is like you need blooming tweezers. Because the point is you have to check what resource you've got, because you've made an assumption about what that resource is. And the risk of assumptions is, if that's not actually the resource, and then you get there, now every kid with manual dexterity issues has also got a problem that you didn't see coming, because you didn't actually check what you were going to use. So there's a lot of risks in the world of SEND when you're teaching, and how you manage those risks is really key, because you can't plan for all those risks, because you won't see them coming. Because some young people will look like they learn a certain way, and then out of the blue, they'll do something else, and you'll be like, whoa, okay. And either it'll be awe and wonder, because you'll be like, didn't know they could do that, or it'll be, oh, they can't even do it like that, how am I going to do it now? And the key is that adaptive learning. So, you know, is there a reason that you can't do both methods? Because actually I quite like the visualisers, you know, I'm quite keen on visualisers, except when they become a bit, no, they can become a bit boring if everything in a room is under a visualiser. Like, literally, there are some schools that, I should have said, I am also still an Ofsted inspector. You know, you go into some schools and everything goes under the visualiser, and you think, okay, but the child's never actually touched the book. The child's never opened the pages of a book, because we've always put it under a visualiser. Do children actually know what a book feels like? You know, sometimes you have to do that real life activity, that real connectedness with young people to ensure that they've learned what you told them. Because it ain't a magic trick, is it? We learn as we go, and we develop as we go. And we're all still learners, right? You know, every day I'll go out and there'll be something and I'll think, oh, I need to magnify that because I've not done that before and I need to give that a go. And some of the best teaching I see is from early careers teachers, because they're so enthused by the world that you think, and they've got better technical knowledge than people my age. You know, I was at school with the BBC that could draw a square on the floor, and we all thought that was amazing. You know, and look at what's out there now, and I've got special needs kids who can use iPads quicker than I can use my phone. Like, So you have to go with what resources are available and what you know and what you're able to do. So the challenge is that often pupils with special needs don't generalise easily. So just because they can do it in the maths room doesn't mean they'll do it in the English room. And the question is, does the English teacher even know what they can do in the maths room? Because quite often that comes as a surprise. But skills and concepts need to be learned and practiced in different places, in different environments, led by different people, because sometimes adaptation differentiation is about making it easy, but it isn't. It isn't about making it easy. It's about creating an environment and a manner in which that young person can learn. Learning's difficult, particularly for young people with some needs around how they memorise learning. Unlearning is really hard. So if they learn something and you've taught it wrong, don't try and teach it right straight after. You've got to go back a step. You've got to unteach what you've taught them before you can teach them to do it again. Otherwise, their processing is going to be all over the place. You haven't got a hope in hell of getting to the end result. Accuracy and consistency do matter. Once you've given an approach for behaviour management, just changing it the next day or 10 minutes time, you know, don't tap your pencil, but now it's all right to tap your pencil, causes chaos, causes absolute chaos in every class. And yet we know we teach children, particularly at secondary schools, in different places, at different times, using different staff, and then the weather changes, and then we measure their progress. And if you've got a learning challenge, ADHD, any of that, actually, that can be really difficult because, especially I find, if someone moves it unexpectedly. So if you set up a meeting with me and it's in room A, and I get to room A and I know what room A looks like, I understand room A, I know how I'm going to manage myself in room A. Suddenly we go to room Z. I've never set foot in room Z before, but now I'm expected to behave and manage in the same way as I would be in room A. But room Z's not set up the same. It's got 2 walls of windows. It's far more distracting. I can't sit in the corner. I can't face. So sometimes we move young people for a lesson and we think, oh, it's great, we take them somewhere else. Is it great? Is it great for all of your young people, or are there some young people that are going to be challenged? And we call it reasonable. So we do all of that, measure their progress, and then say, well, that's reasonable, isn't it? Because they'll all make progress, won't they? Yeah, by magic. Because they just won't, will they? And expect that everyone gets the same out of it. How many legs has the elephant got?
It's hard to look at it like that, isn't it?
I love the fact 2 people are staring and counting legs.
That is really hard.
It's an elephant. How many legs has an elephant got?
4.
It's got 4.
That is total
Yes.
illusion.
Yeah, it looks like 8. I've had every number under the sun to do with that. My point is, we present work at the front of a room quite often, and we expect everybody to see the same thing.
Yeah.
We don't know what it looks like to them. How do we know what it looks like to be, I don't know, Bob sat at the back of the classroom staring at a board? You think it's a beautiful explanation of what you're trying to achieve. Bob's thinking, I don't know, I'm still staring at the legs. Like, Bob has no idea what you're trying to get out of it because he's still trying to count the legs, and you will have moved on. Clarity of message is really important. The other important thing is to think about the wider room. So how many, particularly primary schools again, tend to be the issue here. So I'll go into a primary school and you've got every display going on. You've got letters and sounds on one wall, you've got a maths wall, you've got this over here, you've got that over there, and it's the maddest environment, right? And then we say to the kids, right, everybody look at me, and I stand here with a display behind me that's got a flapping bit of paper, and, you know, something else, a whirly thing, or a washing line where things are moving, and the kids are so distracted, and we're like, no, pay attention. Well, I tell you, I couldn't pay attention if the person talking to me wasn't the most important thing on that space. I mean, Bob's still looking at the elephant, isn't he? He hasn't moved on. It's the fact I'm here. So I always say to people, primary, but I think it's true secondary too, you know, think about where you stand. So if I stand here and I'm now talking about rabbits, Bob's still looking at an elephant, right? He hasn't come to rabbits because the elephant's there. Whereas if I stand here and talk about rabbits, Bob's far more likely to have come with me because I've moved. He's now like, I mean, he will keep dancing at the elephant, but the space I've got is a clear space. I'm the most important thing. You know, in many ways, I'm the least ever likely head teacher because I wouldn't say that my people are far more academically able than I am. But when I worked for Ofsted, they used to send me to really challenging schools because I could walk in a school and get all the kids on board straight away. Whereas, you know, you go in suited and booted and you look a bit typical, and some of those kids are going to test you. Whereas if you go in and it's clear that you've got your own kind of learning thing going on, the kids are really accepting of that. And they know I'm accepting of them. So it's about how we make those adjustments. A blank wall is really important. Really important. A blank space where you can be the most important thing is so simple, but so important. And that transition, if I want to teach different concepts, I will teach different concepts, particularly to children with learning difficulties in different places in the room. Because then as I remind them of those concepts, I can place myself in those spots. So I've just taught you about elephants here. What did I teach you about over here?
Rabbits.
It's really easy, isn't it? And for young people, that physical movement of me or them or stuff actually can be really, really important to them internalising that information, particularly difficult concepts when they're younger. Actually move yourself. Change where you're standing, change how you're standing, sit down, stand up. You know, no rule says you have to teach stood up in the front, does it?
You know, on the displays then, would you recommend for SEN pastoral colours that's less?
Do you know, colours is an interesting thing because people say, oh, don't use reds, because actually children with autism can't manage in red spaces. In Martin Bacon, I've got a red woodwork shop, right? No child with autism has a problem with it. So it's about the individual needs. You'll have some kids who want yellow paper, some kids who work better on blue. You know, the number of places I go and they say, oh, we use blue paper for children with dyslexia. Oh, have you screened them then? Well, no, but we use blue so the children with well, how do you know that that child with dyslexia needs blue paper? So I wouldn't necessarily say that. And if you've got something you really want to stand out, why wouldn't you use a bright colour? I think it's that bit of logic to your displays. They're not haphazard and random. There's a logic to them. They're a defined space. So all of the English information will be defined here. No, not on ribbons wrapping around the room that are really hard to follow. Everything you need to know about maths is in this box. And make sure you change it. And then make sure you value people. Wow work, really simple way of valuing young people. Just put up the best work from last week from their starting point. So who did something cracking? You know, those things are quite easy to do. Defining a border with black line is always something I would suggest. And a space to be yourself as a teacher. Okay, this is one of our lovely MBA students. She's a character, as you can probably tell just from the photo. And she challenged us, okay, because looks neurotypical, sounds neurotypical, absolutely isn't neurotypical, okay? So how do you measure, how do you know what you value? What would you say you want children to leave school with? Do you want them to be happy when they go home?
Yeah. Inspired.
Inspired. Great.
Learn something. Developed in some ways.
Developed in some way. Describe one of the ways.
Well, it could be something that they've learned, like subject specific life skill in general. Right? They're like making friends, making connections, time management.
Excellent. Well connected, able to manage their own time. Yeah, all of those things we think are important. Okay. So what do you measure?
Behaviour, so you kind of see how they behave in lessons, how they improve over time.
Academic. Measure academically, but how
Tests and things.
works have changed.
Okay, so how do I use my academic outcomes to tell me that child's happy? Right? How do I use my academic outcomes to let me know that child's well connected? Right, so we've got a bit of an oddity anyway, haven't we? Because what do government measure schools by? Academic outcomes. Great. Brilliant. We're doing really well so far. So we're going to measure how... Right, where's Martin Bacon Academy, who we talked about this morning? Where are they on any line of academics?
So look like progress 8 schools, that look at sorts of things.
Okay, and what do you think Martin Bacon's Progress 8 score looks like? If you don't take a GCSE, what does your Progress 8 score look like? Oh, yeah, there it is. So when you look at the government guidance, you might know, but if you look at something called the IDSR, you can see the school's outcomes academically over time. Martin Bacon never gets off the bottom line, okay? Because if children start here, they may have made shed loads of progress. They may be well connected. They may be better prepared for adulthood. The school will never get off that bottom line unless they get GCSE. And if only one kid in the whole school gets a GCSE, it's still not getting you anywhere near off the bottom line, is it? Because Progress 8 needs more subjects than one. Maybe they were brilliant at music. Maybe they did get a GCSE. Makes no difference to my outcomes. And actually, if we fail to value all the other things you've talked about, who are we letting down? The kid. Because if we don't recognise that a child has become more connected and will now sit at a table with their peers, or in a primary school can go to the dining room and eat with a knife and fork, or can go to that author's presentation. Right. Why is it not measured?
Is it because of the society we live in? We basically just want to clone the same people. Sorry, my contact missing that. You want to just clone the same people to be able to be effective in this one labour market.
We're trying to create a world that's not a reality, aren't we? We're trying to create a world that's not a reality because it's easier to measure. Okay, there is something called the TED's happiness scales. You can absolutely measure kids' happiness and you can measure the progress in that. And it takes you 30 seconds at the start of a year. And actually, you can measure it termly and the kids think it's really funny. They love it, right? So we know which kids are happier. We can measure their connectedness by how much engagement they give us, how much engagement they give their peers. But if we're going to say it's progress for our young people centre, we must have measured it at the start. Because progress measures have to start somewhere and get to somewhere. If you just measure it at the end, you don't know how far they've come, do you? No, simple maths. You've got to have a starting point for this to build on. So you've got to make those decisions because as teachers, it's up to us to value progress that isn't in line with an academic system. That's our choice. It's our classroom. Own it. It's my school. You know, as you can imagine, in my schools, we value stuff. We value going to the seaside, eating fish and chips. We value the pledges of engagement and working alongside others. So there are measures of progress. And actually, youngsters love them. Adults don't find them difficult to measure. But they show me all of the wider stuff. I know which kids can now go on a trip that couldn't before. I know which kids are better connected. Because you then, as you get on in your teaching career, have got to value it and then challenge others. There will be people who only think, particularly at secondary, particularly in maths, the only thing that matters is that GCSE, preferably a grade 5 or above. Okay? you know, that's what matters. Yeah, it is. But actually, for a kid who's never come to maths before, walking in the door matters. Because if they don't come in the door, they ain't going to get that GCSE. So en route to that GCSE, you've got to value everything else. You've got to value those steps of progress that make that child different, individual, and then value their superpower. Look, I know you find time really difficult, but you're brilliant at number. So let's use your starting point of number to help us learn about time. You know, actually, that would be amazing progress.
Would you say Ofsted value that?
So the handbook says, worked really hard to get this in the handbook. The handbook says progress from their starting point in whatever form. So Ofsted can value that progress if you measure it at the beginning and know where it is now. Then you can present it as progress because it's for that child from their starting point.
How, on the starting point, how would you measure this? So, like, say for instance, you've got a child who doesn't really access the curriculum much, but then in the English lesson, we did like a naughty bus, right? And then we had some beans, and they got up and got the bus and went through the beans on top of what it felt like, but then they didn't access any of the other lesson. But that's a huge jump from the beginning. How do you show?
So you want an engagement model kind of process to that, and there is a model called the engagement model. It was the outcome of the Rochford review,
Right.
written by Diane Rochford. It led to the pre-key stage standards.
Mm-hmm.
So before a child can access pre-key stage standards, they have to be able to access the engagement model.
Okay, so then that would be the thing you compare from now to.
I sat on the Rochford review. It was great. Diane Rochford is amazing. In our schools, we have something called shared OAP. It doesn't mean old age pensioners. It is in the code of practice, and it means ordinarily available provision, and it is really important. And we build it onto the code of practice. You can find any Meridian school, Google it, download it from their website. Actually, what it will help you to do as new teachers is go, I'm really struggling with a kid with this need. What could I do? And it kind of tells you what to do. But it's there, it's free, we don't hide it, help yourself to it, take what you like. Right, now I want to introduce somebody. I'd like you to meet Max. Max is 6 years old. Max lives at home with just his mum, but mum has some alcohol issues, and Max has got home in the evening and mum is not there. So he sat on the step for 2 hours and mum's still not come home. Eventually he's climbed in through the kitchen window and he's hurt his finger. Okay, so he's now at home and nobody's there and he's hurt. It gets really late, but there's no food because mum's still not there. So he's hungry. The heating's not on, so now he's cold. And we've reached the point where it's bedtime. Max is like, well, I'll go to bed. So he goes upstairs, he lays on the floor where there is no bed, he just has a mattress on the floor. And then he hears mum come in. So eventually he goes to sleep, but he's sleeping in his clothes because he's cold and he hasn't got a duvet, he's just got a blanket. He wakes up in the morning, mum's hungover, he tries to wake and she doesn't wake. But he knows he's got to get to school. So he goes to look for some breakfast, there isn't any. He goes outside in his clothes that he slept in and wore to school the day before, and it's raining, so now he's wet. He's too late for the school bus, so he walks to school. He arrives at school and it's 10:15, and he gets to the gate and he rings the bell at reception, and the first thing someone says to him is,
Why are you late?
Why are you late? We're not going to sit in here, I'll get in trouble. Why are you late? And we all know that Max goes boom. Yeah? And actually, what we know is there are better ways to deal with that. Because we assume that he's just late. Yeah? We don't know Max's story from the night before.
Yeah.
We don't know what he's lived through. So the first line to a child should always be what?
Are you okay?
Okay, so now I can slowly start to de-escalate. You okay? I'm here to listen. I'm happy to help. Is there anything I can do for you? You look a bit wet. Would you like me to dry your clothes? Do you want a dry set of clothes? Have you had any breakfast? Particularly primary. Have you had any breakfast? Do you need a hot drink? You know, and you start to see Max slowly unwind. you see that energy, that pent up fear and all of that, you will end up with a very distressed child. But actually now, you're best placed to meet his need and help Max. Because Max might now say to you, I haven't had any dinner, I haven't had any breakfast, I've slept in my clothes, I'm cold, I'm wet, I couldn't wake my mum this morning, so I don't know if she's alive. Now, we don't hear those stories often enough, but we know they happen lots. And the problem is that Max doesn't stay 7. Max becomes 14. And what we know now is that that 7-year-old would have made a mess. That 14-year-old is a bigger mess, and more frightening, and less controlled, and less able to manage. So when young people enter schools with those challenges for their behaviour, we have to think about us as the adults. We're the adults. Right? It's our responsibility to support the unseen and the unknown, the unidentified need. So we as a trust talk about zero indifference. Lots of trusts say we're a zero tolerance trust, don't they? You hear that? Oh, we're a zero tolerance school. We're not. We're a zero indifference trust. And we're a zero indifference school. Because zero indifference means that I take time to stop and think. And because I've made sure that I'm connected with my young people and engaged with those children I work with, there's no way I could be indifferent. Because I'd have to get down to that level and ask Max what was wrong. I'd have to take the time to find that 15-year-old. These are the ones I'm good at, right? These big 15-year-old lads who are 6'4" and scare the shit out of everybody. There's an untold story. Believe me, there's an untold story. And you watch a kid now, the next time you go into school and a child has a real behaviour difficulty, and you think, oh, God, here we go again. Ask yourself, what's the untold story? What do I not know? However, there are some quick wins with kids. You know, people always say, right, come in, coats off, sit down, please. Okay, straight away, please is a problem. Don't use the word please. Okay, use the word thank you. Have a seat, thanks. Kids can't help themselves. They go and sit down because you've thanked them already. There's an assumed behaviour that's already taken place. So you watch the kids go, oh, she said thank you, I should already be in my seat. If you say please, you can end up pleading, can't you? You can end up going, please sit down. Please get your pens out, please. Oh, such an annoying word. Yeah? Try thank you. Next time, next lesson, everyone sit down, thanks, and then start. Wait that moment after you said thanks, and then start. Make the assumption they've done it. Don't plead them to do it. Yeah? Really simple technique. There are other techniques for a Max. Sometimes it's about time, and sometimes it's about connectedness. Now, if I've bothered to get to know Max before this, I might already know there's some difficulty, but I know Max's superpower is football. So, because I needed some connectedness with Max, I went to his football match the night before, and I watched, or even last week, and I watched him play after school in the football, and told him he was brilliant. That connectedness means that I can come in alongside Max. I can be Max's safe person. Identify those kids that you know will have, particularly at your age, have a backstory. You don't need to know the whole backstory, but connect with those kids with that backstory. Not in a way that interrupts or interferes with their backstory, but that supports their superpower, because when it goes wrong, they'll come and share their backstory with you because you will be worth it. So, we just said communication is the key to this. Communication is the key to who we are as adults. I'm really lucky. I have one of those voices. I think you'll... if I go out on the playground and go, right, I can get silence across the playground. Yeah, and it comes from, so I used to march with the marching band. I used to be a field commander, so I used to be the person at the front who yelled. When we have competed at places, I've managed to call whole fields of marching bands to attention because my voice just goes straight across and everyone does it because they don't know what else to do. But one of the things I've learned about how I use my voice is to actually use my words carefully with it too. Because I've got a big voice, everyone will hear it. So when I connect with young people in the classroom, making sure that I put a different voice on and I approach it in a different way, because the whole classroom doesn't need to know that Max is worried that his mum's at home and she hasn't woken up this morning. But Max needs to know I care. And actually, one of the statements that schools make is, well, all behaviour is communication. And this touches on what you asked me. Is it? Well, a lot of it. Mad moments aside. There will be something that means that young person is finding it difficult to tell you what they need to engage them. You know, naughty boys. You know, oh, he's just one of them naughty boys. Is he? How do you know? How are you assured? How have you checked? Because quite often they're playing up to their peers because they've got a social need. They've got a connection gap. Someone's got to step in and be that connectedness. You find out that actually dad died 2 years ago. Brother's just recently left the family home to go to university. Strangely, the child's now not connected. Okay, so who's going to step in and be the connection? So what I would say is communication, most behaviour is a form of communication. In the moment, behaviour is a bit different. Like, sometimes I know my behaviour is just to be annoying. Okay, my CEO will call me out on it now all the time. I can just be an annoying person in the room, or I can be well managed to use my superpower to be effective in what we do. And that kind of reflects our story of Max in that, I don't know if this is working, in that actually we don't know, and there could be all those reasons for that behaviour. Quite often it is that they're scared of failure, scared of, yeah? So just being mindful to remember Max, because all kids are amazing, all adults are amazing. It's so much easier to work with everybody if everybody in the group has their needs met. And by everybody I mean us as adults, because we have needs too. We have a need to be listened to, we have a need to be wanted, we have a need to, like, we have those needs, children have those needs. So how do we make sure that everybody in that has their needs met? And that's about connectedness. Behaviour is easier to manage, needs are easier to identify and meet when we're more connected. So what you need to do is be brave and go out there and do it differently and not be afraid. I'm literally the least likely ever head teacher, which makes me the least likely executive, which made me the least likely person to be Ofsted's National Lead for SEND. But being different, knowing my own skills and my own superpowers, but also accepting my own special needs, means that I've got a lot further than perhaps anyone when I was at school thought I might. That's it. Thank you very much. And I think I'm spot on time.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting.